In this chapter, we will take a look at joints in Maya. The easiest way you can think about joints is it's like a skeleton which we will place inside the model. We'll place the joints where the big skeletal landmarks are, or rather where the skeleton is rotating from. And after we've done that, then we can actually bind the model to our joint system, and then we can deform the model. So we find joints under skeleton and create joints. We have to be under the rigging menu as well for this to work. So if we go to the front view, we can now start to create some joints. If we just create them here in the viewport, you can see what's happening. It creates this chain, and you can just click in order to create a new joint. It will create a new joint from whatever is currently selected. And then if we were to open up into our hierarchy, remember shift click to open up the hierarchy, you can now see what's happened. It creates joint 1 and then all the way down to joint 9. If we were to go into the move tool now, rotate tool, then we can start to rotate these around. And this is really the strength of it. Imagine this here as a character. Now we can start to deform the character based on the joints. With the move tool, hold down the D key. Now we can actually move each individual joint. If you just move it without moving the pivot, it'll move the entire chain. This is where using the actual insert key is quite handy, because now you don't have to hold down the D key all the time. We can just hit insert on the keyboard if you have that on the keyboard, and then we can move it like so. I'm not holding down anything right now. I'm just clicking and dragging in the hierarchy. Then we can hit insert again, and now we can't move it around. If we want to change the size of the joints, the visual size of it, we can also do that. If you go to display, animation, joint size, now here you can see that we can change the actual size of the joints. This depends on your scene size. This is a quite small character. So in our case, we want this to be just a little bit bigger so we can see a bit more what we're doing. Now, if we want to create a joint coming out of here, for instance, we can easily do that. If we select this joint, you don't have to select the actual joint itself. You can just drag over it like so. Now we can do this by clicking on the joint with the joint tool selected, and then we can click again, and then we will have created joints from this point. We can also create a joint just free flowing, and then we can parent it. The only reason there is any kind of connection between it, like it looks like a bone, is because they have been parented. So if we were to create a new joint, just an open space, and we shift click another joint and hit the P key, you can now see that we have created a chain between these two. So if we were to now select all the joints, hit shift P, you can now see that these all disappear. Shift P here as well. Just unparent all these as well. There we go. So now you can see that these they're not actual bones between them. There aren't actually bones between them. What we have is we have a visual indicator of how these are connected. So we can start to reconnect these in some way, whatever you want to. The hierarchy can be changed at any time when it comes to this. But with all this said, let's just delete all the joints. We'll now do this more properly on top of the character. But this is the most basic version of joints. So now we can create joints and just hit create joints. And now we can start to block in the character. But one thing you might want to do, let me show you a problem, is when we start to just click on the joints, like so, we can just start to drag it out. You can see that these are just completely straight. They're not actually, taking any kind of the model into account. So you can see it's just a straight line going up and down. What we can do, instead of doing it like this, let's just delete this entire chain, we can enable this snapping mode. This is one we haven't talked about before, which is snap projected to center. And now it will actually put it right in the center. So create joints, and now you can see that this actually puts it right in the center, which makes it a lot easier to actually make new joints. Again, delete this. Okay, last time we delete joints, I promise. So what we will do now is we'll start creating the joints for the character. We start with the actual center, which is around where the hips will be. Then we click, And then we create a joint where this is where the greater trochanter would be. This is where you actually pivot from when it comes to your hips. Then we click in the center of the knee. And then we click on the ankle. And then we click on at the where the toes would be. We're not making an advanced rig here whatsoever. We're keeping it very simple. And now we're creating the spine. Deselect everything. You can do this by hitting Alt and D. Then we can hit create joints. Now we can hit the center joint. This is called a root joint. And then we can start to create a joint system going all the way up into his neck. In this case, we can disable projector to center, and then we can hit spacebar, Maya, right view, and then we can create this just through the side view. This just ensures that it's actually projected directly in the center axis when it comes to the x-axis. Just meaning that now, if we look at it, it's actually going to be right in the middle. Let's go to right view again, and then we can add joints like so. So now we have a fair few joints, and they're right in the middle of the model, and that's intentional. I find that I get better deformation if I put them in the middle, instead of putting them in where the spine would be. The spine would be, around here, but I find I get better deformation this way. Then we can go to the front view, and then we can start to create the joints for the arm. So deselect everything, joint tool, then we can click on this joint right here. And then we want to enable the center project. We can go to perspective view. And then we can create a clavicle joint like so. And then we can create where the deltoid joint. And then we can make a joint in where the elbow goes. And then we can create one where the wrist is. And then we can create one for the hand. Now, if this isn't perfectly accurate, that's fine. Because like we said, we can move these around. For instance, in this case, this joint needs to be moved just down a little bit. So now we can select the joint, hold down the D key, and we can just move it down like so. And we will of course only make one side, and we'll duplicate this over to the other side as well. Let's just make sure this here is okay. Let's move this a little bit forward. Hold down the D key and just move it a bit forward. And we can do the same for the clavicle joint as well. And again, you have to hold down a D key because otherwise it's going to move the entire chain. So hold down a D key. We can move it like so. Now, if we want to reparent this to a different joint, actually this here isn't actually ideal. We want to parent this to this. What we can do, we can hit Shift P and that will unparent it. Then we can make sure this chain is selected. Then we shift click on this chain. And then we hit the P key. And now you can see that we've actually reparented this. This is really important to know because, like we said, this is only a relationship between these two. So you could also just drag these between each other as well. And now you see what's happening. Just move it down a little bit. And now we can mirror this from left to right. We can do this by using the mirror tool, mirror joints tool. We have to select the settings for this because this is not going to be correct by default. By default, it's going to be setting that is going to be mirroring across the X and Y axis. And this is where, again, I have to consult my axes down here. So now we're going to be mirroring across the wrong axis. So let's see what happens. Now it mirrors across this axis, which is terrible because why would you want that? So what we have to do across Y, which is this axis, and Z, which is this axis. So again, consult your little axis diagram down here to make this easy. Then we click apply, and now you can see that we have created a symmetrical joint system. We can do the same for the legs as well. Just hit apply. And there we go. Now, one thing which is super important if you're doing this for real, like this is obviously a quick example and we're not making a production model. But what's essential when you're doing this in a proper rig is that you name your joints. You can see here, this is a complete mess. You're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of joints in a full rig. So in this case, you don't know what this is just by looking at the hierarchy. So you really, really should name your joints, you should name them. If it's based on left, right, or center, you should name it so that if you were to look at only the hierarchy, you would know exactly what joint this is. For our purposes right now, it's a little bit overkill, and you would just watch me rename stuff for 5 minutes. But for a full rig, you just have to do that. So in the next chapter, we will take a look at this model as well when it comes to actually painting some weights on it.